Hello everyone, this is Jeff Badger, the Grinding Doc, and I am heading off to Switzerland tomorrow, to Zurich, where I am doing a course hosted by Reishauer and by grinding guru Walter Graf. Will make a celebrity guest appearance. That'll be very cool. And then after Switzerland, I'm going to head over to Slovenia and Croatia, where there is the ISAT conference, International Society of Advances in Abrasive Technology. And my colleagues and I at the Grinding Institute will be presenting a paper and, more importantly, hanging out, eating some Croatian fish, drinking some Malvasia, going swimming in the Adriatic Sea, and discussing grinding. So before I head out tomorrow, this is a video going back to 1969, I believe, maybe a little later. It's work by Malkin, and Malkin's thesis was around 1969. And so this is some excellent work done on what happens as grinding wheels become dull, and then how wheel grade plays a part in that. Okay, so this is a graph from one of Malkin's early papers, and Malkin is the world grinding guru. I would say probably the smartest guy in the world ever to exist in grinding. His work is just fabulous. His writing skills are fabulous. His design of experiments are fabulous. The guy just knew his stuff. Okay, and this is a graph that we created for one of his papers, effects of grain size and operating parameters. And what Malkin did was he ground. So he dressed his wheel, and then he started to grind. And then he kept grinding, and he measured the normal force and the tangential force. And Malkin did it in pounds. 10 pounds is about, what, 5 kilos? 40 pounds is about 8 kilos, something like, no, don't quote me on that. 40 pounds is around 18 kilos, I would say, or around 180 newtons. So here we have the normal force and the tangential force. And as I teach in my course, the tangential force is the force pushing that way, which is responsible for heat generation. And the normal force is pushing up on the wheel. It doesn't generate any heat, but the normal force causes issues with deflection, chatter, and other issues. Okay. And if you really want to do a fabulous experiment, you really should measure normal force and tangential force. Measuring power is almost as good, but really when you measure normal force and you know the ratio between the normal force and the tangential force, you get a lot of information about the process. Okay. So let's take these one by one. And let's start with the G wheel. A G wheel is a soft wheel. A G wheel does not have a lot of bond material. So what happens is Malkin started grinding, and the tangential force went up a little bit. The normal force went up a little bit more, but still, overall, not too bad. So the life of the test, the normal force went up somewhat. The tangential force went up somewhat. And the tangential force is really the heat generator, the power. So if you look at your power meter on your machine, in either watts or amps or horsepower, in a sense, it's telling you the tangential force, because power is just tangential force times wheel speed. So if you know tangential force, you know the power. If you know the power, you know the tangential force. Normal force you can't measure with a power measuring device. You have to have a fancy dynamometer from Kistler or some kind of strain gauges or something else. So normal force actually tells you a bit more about the process in a sense than the tangential force, but it's more difficult to measure. And so what Malkin saw is he started at around 6 pounds, and as he continued to grind, he got up to maybe 12 pounds. So his normal force doubled. Now, why does normal force double? Because the little grits in the wheel are becoming dull and flat. And when they become dull and flat, they rub instead of cut, relatively speaking. They increase the tangential force, but they get an exponential increase in the normal force. So what happens is the grits become dull, and when they become dull, the tangential force of the power goes up a little bit, and the normal force goes up a lot. Now that's with the G wheel. With the I wheel, we get an increase in the tangential force quite a bit, and a huge increase in the normal force. Let's keep going. Now with the K wheel, we start off at almost the same power. Okay, and that's because our wheel is sharp for the G, is sharp for the I, is sharp for the K. But what's happening is the grits are becoming dull. And the trick question I always ask in my course is, are the grits in the K wheel becoming dull at the same rate as the grits in the G wheel? Okay, and the answer is yes, they're becoming dull at the same rate. But what's happening to the grits in the G wheel? They're popping out. What's happening to the grits in the K wheel? They're staying in. And so what we see is, let's take the K wheel. The K wheel, the tangential force started from 4 pounds and it went to about 8 pounds. So it doubled. So if we look at the power in the machine, the horsepower, the watts, the amps, if you like, the power doubled. And you say, oh, I've got more heat generation. I got a bigger risk of burn. According to Jaeger's model, you also get a doubling of the temperature increase, more or less. It can get a little complicated because the rate of convective heat transfer increases as temperatures increase too, but approximately you'll get a doubling of temperature. But look at the normal force. The normal force went from something like 6 pounds, 7 pounds, up to 36 pounds. So the normal force didn't double like the tangential force did. The normal force went up by a factor of 5 or 6. And if the normal force goes up by a factor of 5 or 6, that means we've got 5 or 6 times the force pushing up on the spindle. And that means we have 5 or 6 times the deflection. And then we have a much bigger risk of chatter, difficulty holding size. And then weird things start happening in the wheel because we don't really have a good shear stress or tensile stress pulling on the grits. We actually get compressive stresses, which means the grits don't want to break. And then you get something like called wheel collapse. And it just gets ugly. We don't want to get here. We never, ever, ever want to get to a point where we have that big a normal force, where the normal force is increased sixfold. We can tolerate some increase in the normal force, but not that much. And then we can also mess around with the ratio of normal force to tangential force. And I would guess here it probably goes from something like 1.6 to around 4, something like that, because we're getting an exponential increase in the normal force. And that's why if you're doing hardcore tests of grinding wheels, you want to measure normal force. If you're on the shop floor in the real world trying to optimize a process, power is not okay. But if you're hardcore doing serious tests in the laboratory, you need to measure normal force too. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is we can't tolerate dull wheels. This is an incredibly dull wheel. This here is a pretty dull wheel. This one here we could probably tolerate. Not great, but we could tolerate that guy. Now that G wheel is going to wear away a lot more quickly than the K wheel. K wheel is going to be better for form holding in the short term. Okay, long term things will get weird, but in general we just can't tolerate that K wheel getting that dull. Okay, now these were tests done to prove a point, and that's cool. But if I was going to run that K wheel, then you could say, okay, let's take it a step further. Let's say all we had was a K wheel. We didn't have a G wheel in stock. And the K wheel just becomes duller and duller and duller and causes all the associated problems. How can we get the K wheel to behave, let's say, like the I wheel? You could order an I wheel and you wait 6 to 8 week delivery time, but let's say right now I wanted the K wheel to behave like the I wheel. If I want the K wheel to behave like an I wheel, I would decrease the wheel speed. That makes the wheel act softer. So when you talk to the old-time machinists, they'll say, oh, I decrease the surface speed, and when I do that, the wheel acts softer. And there are some rules of thumb I give in the book that are just old school Joe the Grinder rules to say, hey, if I drop the surface speed by a certain surface feet per minute or meters per second, I will go 1 grade softer. If I drop it this much, it'll go 2 grades softer, something like that. So what we can do is we can get the K wheel to behave like the I wheel by slowing it down. Conversely, if we wanted the I wheel to behave more like the K wheel, we would speed it up. We would run at a faster wheel speed. That would decrease the grit penetration depth. It would decrease the forces on the grits, and it would give us less wheel wear. Okay, give us more heat generation, but it would give us less wheel wear. Okay, so I could spend an hour on this chart discussing it, all the different variations, but then if I did an hour-long video, no one would watch it, myself included. I like videos that are 3 minutes long and not 30 minutes long. We all have shorter attention spans these days. But this is a fabulous chart I give in the Book of Grinding, thanks to Malkin and Knopin. I don't know who Knopin is. That must have been one of Malkin's graduate students, I assume. But this is just some fabulous work that explains grinding from first principles. And it also explains why you just don't want to grind with a dull wheel. And that's something I keep harping on in my courses. Whatever you do, don't grind with a dull wheel. And if you need a better surface finish, switch to a smaller grit size. If you need to self-sharpen your wheel, decrease your wheel speed. or go dress the wheel. But the biggest problem in the grinding world is when wheels get to this point. That's when things go bad. Probably not going to get there with a G wheel unless you dress the wheel dull. Now, we could get there if we dress the wheel dull at the beginning, which a lot of people do. And that's not to say K wheels are bad. It's just that K wheels are going to become dull over time. If you're grinding high-speed steel, this will be a big issue. If you're grinding 52-100 steel, it's not going to be as big an issue, but that's another subject. So that's it. This is Jeff Badger, the Grinding Doc, talking about normal forces, the ratio of normal force and tangential force, how wheels dull, soft wheels versus hard wheels, getting soft wheels to behave like hard wheels, getting hard wheels to behave like soft wheels, and all the other stuff that are relevant to the fundamental first principles of grinding, which you really need to have a handle on if you're going to be a good grinder. If you want to learn more, attend one of my courses. Get a copy of the 4,000-page book of grinding. We just came out with 2 new updated sections. It's getting huge, getting still very, very helpful, and it's still the best place to get practical information about grinding. There's a lot of good academic information out there, a lot of good textbooks out there, but they're heavy reading. But the best place for down-to-earth practical information for people who are in the real world making things happen is the Book of Grinding. Jeff Badger, thanks for listening, and I will see you again.